Every time you release dopamine, your brain takes notes. It records not just pleasure, but how you got it, and how quickly, in that instant of release, your brain whispers, "This feels good, do it again." And you will, because dopamine doesn't just make you feel pleasure, it makes you want pleasure. It's the chemical of pursuit, not satisfaction. Now imagine this happening every single day. Every time you release, your brain experiences a spike of dopamine, a rush that feels harmless, even healthy. But what most people don't realize is that the brain always seeks balance. For every spike of pleasure, there's an equal and opposite crash of pain. That's the dopamine trap. When you release every day, you're not giving your brain time to reset. You flatten your baseline dopamine levels. What once gave you excitement now feels ordinary. You start needing more stimulation just to feel normal. Energy fades, motivation slips, joy feels muted. You begin chasing the next release, not out of desire, but out of discomfort. It's not about morality. It's neuroscience. Our ancient brains weren't built for constant pleasure. They evolved for challenge, for restraint, for anticipation. But today, pleasure is instant, available at the tap of a screen, a click, a thought. We've created a world where dopamine is cheap and discipline is rare, and that's what's hijacking our focus, our drive, our ability to love deeply or work passionately. When you stop for a while, when you reclaim control, something powerful happens. The first few days might feel awful, agitation, boredom, emptiness, that's withdrawal, that's your brain recalibrating, but then clarity returns. The small things start to feel good again, the mind sharpens, energy flows naturally, you feel alive, not overstimulated but grounded. The truth is, dopamine is not your enemy, it's your teacher. It's trying to tell you when you've had enough. Every urge is a message, a chance to pause, to choose discomfort over indulgence, to rebuild strength instead of surrendering it. Because freedom doesn't come from constant pleasure. It comes from balance. So the next time you feel that pull, that reflexive need for another hit, another release, don't ask, "What will this give me?" Ask, "What will this take from me?" That single question can break the cycle, restore your mind, and free you from the dopamine trap. Every hit of pleasure writes a memory, and your brain never forgets who gave it to you. That's how powerful dopamine is. It's not just a fleeting chemical rush that fades when the moment passes. It's a neurological imprint, a record of what made you feel good and how easily you got there. The brain is always learning, always adapting. When it discovers something that brings instant pleasure, it marks it as important for survival. It doesn't matter whether that thing is food, a drug, a screen, or an orgasm. The brain only knows that pleasure equals reward, and reward means repeat. Each time you give in to that source of pleasure, you strengthen the connection. Neural pathways become highways, smooth and automatic. The next time you feel stressed, lonely, bored, or anxious, the brain doesn't ask what's wrong. It remembers the shortcut to relief. It remembers who or what gave it that dopamine hit last time. That's why habits are so hard to break. You're not just fighting an impulse, you're fighting a well-paved neurological road that your brain has come to trust. This is the essence of the dopamine trap, a biological memory loop. You might think you're making a conscious choice, but often the choice is already made deep within the limbic system before you're even aware of it. The moment you feel discomfort, the brain retrieves its reward map and points you toward that same behavior again. The more you repeat it, the stronger the memory, the harder it is to resist. Over time, what began as pleasure becomes compulsion. And here's the paradox. The same brain that drives you toward pleasure will also punish you for overindulging. Dopamine's job is to maintain balance. Every spike in pleasure is followed by a crash, a subtle state of discomfort that pushes you to seek another high. This push-pull creates the cycle of craving. What starts as relief from pain eventually becomes the cause of it. The brain remembers the pleasure but forgets the cost. It remembers the feeling of escape but not the emptiness that followed when this loop continues. For days, weeks, or months, your baseline dopamine levels begin to flatten. Ordinary joys, a walk, a conversation, a meal, start to feel dull. You need stronger, faster, and more frequent stimulation just to feel okay. The brain's memory of pleasure grows sharper, but its ability to feel content fades. This is why recovery is not just about stopping a behavior. It's about retraining the brain to forget its dependence. and remember how to enjoy balance again. Breaking the loop requires discomfort. When you stop giving the brain its easy fix, it panics. It sends signals of restlessness, boredom, sadness. That's withdrawal. Not from a substance, but from a pattern of memory and reward. Yet if you stay through it, something extraordinary happens. The brain begins to prune those old pathways, to weaken the associations that once ruled your behavior. You start forming new memories, ones tied not to instant pleasure, but to meaning, effort, and purpose. The truth is, pleasure is meant to teach us what's good for us, not enslave us. When you begin to see every urge as a memory trying to repeat itself, you gain power. You can pause and ask, is this truly what I need or just what my brain remembers as relief? That moment of awareness is where freedom begins. Your brain never forgets what gives it pleasure, but it can learn new pleasures, healthier ones, deeper ones. The goal isn't to erase desire, but to redirect it, because when pleasure serves purpose, it strengthens you. But when pleasure becomes memory without meaning, it controls you. And that's the real test of balance in a dopamine-driven world. To remember that not every memory deserves to be repeated. Dopamine doesn't just make you feel good, it makes you crave good. That's how control quietly slips away. Every surge of dopamine is a signal, a chemical whisper that says, do that again. It's not about satisfaction, it's about motivation. This molecule was designed by evolution to drive us towards survival, to make us seek food, safety, and connection. But in the modern world, that same mechanism has been hijacked. The brain that once helped us chase what we needed now pushes us to chase what we want endlessly. When you feel pleasure, dopamine floods the brain's reward system. It creates a link between the activity and the feeling, a cause and effect so powerful that even thinking about the reward can trigger the same craving. The brain doesn't understand moderation, it only understands patterns. Action equals pleasure, pleasure equals repeat. That's why you can know something is harmful, feel regret, and still do it again. It's not weakness, it's biology. The craving is what traps you. Pleasure is short-lived, craving lasts, dopamine peaks before the reward even happens. It's the anticipation, the wanting that drives you. The release, the actual pleasure, is brief and often followed by emptiness, and that emptiness fuels the next pursuit. You're no longer chasing joy, you're running from discomfort. The mind becomes a pendulum swinging between desire and dissatisfaction. The more you feed it, the faster it swings. Over time, the brain adjusts. The receptors that once lit up from a small hit of dopamine become less sensitive. What once gave you excitement now barely registers. You need more intensity, more frequency to feel the same rush. This is how habits deepen into dependency. The same thing that once made you happy now makes you numb. You keep reaching for the good feeling, but it never quite arrives. Control doesn't vanish overnight. It erodes silently. At first, the behavior feels like a choice, something you can start or stop whenever you want, but repetition changes that. Neural circuits strengthen with use. The more you reward a behavior, the more automatic it becomes. Eventually, it stops feeling like a decision and starts feeling like a reflex. The craving hits before thought, and by the time you notice it, you're already obeying it. This is the quiet theft of agency that dopamine can cause. You think you're chasing happiness, but happiness is no longer the goal, it's the bait. The brain is not interested in contentment, it's interested in the chase. That's why people can achieve everything they thought would make them happy, success, relationships, wealth, and still feel restless. The dopamine system doesn't want satisfaction, it wants pursuit. The only way to regain control is to step outside the cycle, to pause when the craving hits and observe it instead of feeding it. At first, that pause feels impossible. The craving can feel physical, a tension, a pressure that demands release. But if you resist, if you breathe through it, the craving passes. You teach your brain a new rule. Not every urge deserves action. With time, the craving loses its grip. The brain starts to rewire. The pleasure centers become responsive again, but this time, they light up for real experiences. A walk in nature, a deep conversation, a moment of stillness. True pleasure doesn't come from constant stimulation. It comes from contrast, from allowing the space between the highs. When you stop chasing every craving, you make room for meaning. You rediscover patience, focus, gratitude, and that's when dopamine returns to its rightful place, not as your master, but as your guide. Craving is the shadow side of joy. The same system that drives love, curiosity, and achievement can also drive addiction, distraction, and despair. The difference lies in awareness. When you understand that dopamine makes you crave good rather than simply feel good, you begin to see the pattern clearly. You can step out of it, take back control, and choose the kind of pleasure that strengthens you instead of consuming you, because the real reward isn't in the rush. It's in the freedom to no longer need it. Too much pleasure numbs the soul. Only balance restores meaning. Pleasure was never meant to be constant. It was designed as a signal, a brief moment of reward that told our ancestors, "You've done something right, now move forward." But when pleasure becomes endless, when every discomfort is erased by instant gratification, something deep inside us begins to fade. We lose not only our sensitivity to joy, but also our connection to purpose. The very thing we chase for happiness becomes the thing that empties us. In the brain, pleasure and pain exist on the same scale, balanced like a seesaw. When pleasure rises, pain must eventually follow. It's nature's way of keeping equilibrium. Every indulgence tips that seesaw, and with repeated tipping, the brain compensates by lowering its baseline for pleasure. What once made you feel alive now barely stirs emotion. The laughter feels thinner, the excitement shorter, the satisfaction fleeting. It's not that life becomes worse, it's that your ability to feel it fully becomes dulled. This is what happens when we flood the brain with dopamine again and again. The receptors that register pleasure grow numb, tired of constant stimulation. Imagine listening to your favorite song every hour of every day. At first, it's euphoric, then tolerable, then meaningless. The song doesn't change. Your capacity to feel it does. That's the tragedy of overindulgence. The more we seek pleasure, the less it satisfies. The more we chase happiness, the more elusive it becomes. When pleasure dominates, meaning fades. Because meaning comes from contrast, from the struggle, from effort, from waiting. You can't appreciate warmth without having felt cold. You can't savor peace without having known restlessness. And yet, modern life sells the illusion of constant comfort, instant entertainment, instant validation, instant escape. We live surrounded by pleasures that ask nothing of us, that cost nothing, that give everything and yet leave us feeling hollow. It's not that pleasure is bad, it's that pleasure alone cannot sustain a human being. The brain was built for rhythm, for effort followed by rest, for pain followed by relief. When you skip the rhythm and stay in the high, you lose the depth. You stop experiencing the fullness of emotion. Joy becomes shallow because it has no opposite. The soul, deprived of contrast, forgets how to feel. Balance doesn't mean denying pleasure. It means respecting its power. It means allowing yourself to feel discomfort without rushing to fix it. It means sitting in boredom, loneliness, or frustration, and realizing that these states are not punishments. They're pathways back to sensitivity. When you withhold easy pleasure, the brain recalibrates. It becomes more responsive, more alive. The small things, sunlight, music, a touch, regain their color. The restoration of meaning begins in that space between craving and action. When you pause before reaching for the next hit of stimulation, you open a door for awareness. You begin to see how much of your pleasure seeking is automatic, how often you're not choosing joy but escaping silence. And in that silence lies something profound, the capacity to feel again, to experience not just pleasure but gratitude, awe, and connection. The paradox is that by embracing a little pain, you invite deeper pleasure. By allowing space for emptiness, you make room for meaning. The most fulfilled people are not those who feel good all the time, but those who know how to feel everything. Joy and sorrow, effort and ease. They understand that happiness is not a constant state. It's a rhythm, a balance, a dance between craving and contentment. Too much pleasure numbs the soul because it strips away the contrast that gives life its richness. Only balance, the deliberate choice to step back, to feel discomfort, to earn your joy, can restore meaning. The real reward of restraint isn't deprivation, it's the return of depth. It's remembering how to be moved by life again, not because it overwhelms you, but because you've made space for it to matter. In a world that sells pleasure on demand, restraint becomes the ultimate rebellion. Everywhere you look, the promise of instant gratification waits for you. A glowing screen, a notification, a like, a purchase, a release. We no longer have to wait for anything. Every desire can be met in seconds. But what feels like freedom is often the opposite. The easier it is to satisfy an urge, the harder it becomes to feel satisfaction itself. The modern world feeds on our cravings, training us to expect comfort, to avoid silence, to fear stillness. We live in an economy built on attention, and nothing captures attention better than pleasure. Dopamine was once the spark that motivated us to pursue survival, to find food, safety, connection. Now it's been repurposed to keep us scrolling, clicking, and consuming. Companies have learned to hack the brain's reward system, offering endless stimulation that costs nothing up front but drains us quietly over time. The more pleasure we consume, the more our tolerance rises, and the more we need just to feel normal. It's a perfect trap. Pleasure sold as freedom, dependence disguised as choice. Restraint in this environment isn't easy, it's radical. It means choosing to pause when the world tells you to indulge. It means saying no, not because you must, but because you can. When you practice restraint, you take back authorship of your mind. You begin to recognize how much of what you do is driven not by true desire, but by conditioning. Each moment of resistance strengthens a muscle that modern life has taught us to forget. The capacity to wait, to endure, to choose deliberately. When you resist the pull of instant pleasure, you meet yourself in the space that opens up. At first, that space feels uncomfortable, boring, even painful. You feel restless, agitated, disconnected. That's the withdrawal of a brain accustomed to constant stimulation. But if you stay with it long enough, that discomfort transforms. It becomes awareness. You start noticing things that were drowned out before. The rhythm of your breath, the texture of quiet, the subtle satisfaction of doing something not for the reward, but for its own sake. Restraint is not repression, it's reclamation. It's remembering that pleasure should serve you, not enslave you. It's the art of using dopamine wisely, of letting anticipation, patience, and effort rebuild meaning. Because real pleasure isn't in the ease of getting what you want, it's in the process of earning it. When you delay gratification, you give your brain the contrast it craves. You restore the natural balance between effort and reward, and in doing so, pleasure regains its depth. In a society that tells you more is better, restraint reminds you that enough is powerful. It shifts pleasure from being something consumed to something experienced. You start to appreciate small joys, a genuine conversation, a quiet morning, the satisfaction of discipline. These are pleasures that deepen with time, not fade with repetition. They don't demand escape from reality, they reconnect you to it. Choosing restraint doesn't mean rejecting pleasure. It means refusing to be ruled by it. It's understanding that freedom doesn't come from having everything you want. It comes from not needing everything you crave. When you can say no to what's easy, you become capable of saying yes to what's meaningful. In a world overflowing with indulgence, restraint is strength. It's the quiet, unseen act of rebellion that restores clarity in a culture built on noise. It's a return to authenticity in a system designed to exploit weakness. The modern rebel isn't the one who takes more, it's the one who chooses less and feels more. Restraint, in the end, is not the denial of life's pleasures, it's the rediscovery of what makes them worth feeling. Each time you resist the urge, your brain rewires for strength, not slavery. Every urge is a signal, not a command. It's the brain's way of saying, "This used to make me feel better. Should we do it again?" But the truth is, you always have a choice. Every time you pause instead of reacting, you teach your brain something new. You show it that pleasure isn't the only relief, that you can survive discomfort, and that you're no longer a prisoner to every impulse that arises. That single act of resistance, repeated over time, transforms your mind from a follower of craving into a maker of control. When you feel the pull, the craving, the tension, the itch for release, it's your dopamine system lighting up, preparing you for the reward it remembers. The anticipation is the real addiction. It's what drives behavior long before the reward even happens. Most people give in at that moment because the craving feels unbearable. But the craving itself is not pain. It's potential. It's your brain's way of asking, who's in charge here? And when you choose not to obey, something powerful begins to shift. At first, it's uncomfortable. You feel restless, agitated, maybe even anxious. The mind protests because it's used to getting what it wants. But what feels like suffering is actually growth. Each moment you sit with the urge without acting on it, you strengthen the neural circuits of self-control. You're rewiring your brain, neuron by neuron, to prefer mastery over indulgence. And with each victory, however small, your capacity expands. You realize you don't have to silence your urges. You just have to stop serving them. This is how true strength is built, not through the absence of temptation, but through the awareness of it. Resisting an urge isn't about punishment. It's about reclaiming your autonomy. You're no longer being pulled by invisible strings of craving. You're consciously deciding what deserves your attention, your energy, your time. The modern world tells us that freedom means doing whatever we want, whenever we want. But the deeper truth is that freedom comes from not needing to. It's in the quiet confidence of knowing you could, but you won't. Neuroscience shows that the brain is plastic. It can change, adapt, and reorganize itself throughout life. Every decision, every repetition shapes those neural pathways. When you act on impulse, you reinforce dependence. When you resist, you reinforce control. Over time, the brain learns that pleasure delayed is not pleasure denied, it's pleasure deepened. It learns that strength feels better than surrender. The same dopamine that once fueled your cravings can begin to reward your discipline. The more you resist what weakens you, the more your brain begins to crave what strengthens you. And here's the paradox. The urge doesn't disappear, it transforms. It becomes awareness rather than compulsion. You start to notice it without fear. You can watch the craving rise and fall like a wave, knowing it will pass if you let it. That's the moment when you realize you're free. Not because you destroyed the desire, but because it no longer controls you. Each act of resistance plants a seed of resilience. You begin to see discomfort not as an enemy, but as a teacher. You stop chasing the next quick fix and start building endurance for real satisfaction. Strength isn't built in moments of pleasure. It's forged in moments of restraint. Each time you say no to an easy escape, you're saying yes to a stronger version of yourself. So when the next urge comes, and it will, pause, feel it fully, don't run, don't hide, don't feed it, just breathe. Each second you endure without giving in, your brain is learning freedom. That's the quiet evolution of self-mastery. The slow transformation from craving to clarity, from weakness to willpower. Each time you resist the urge, your brain remembers. It learns, it grows stronger, and with every repetition, you move one step further from slavery and one step closer to power. Freedom isn't the absence of desire, it's the ability to pause before obeying it. Desire is part of being human. It's the spark that drives creativity, ambition, connection, and even survival. Without desire, there would be no progress, no movement, no reason to act. But when desire becomes automatic, when every urge demands fulfillment, it stops being a source of energy and starts becoming a form of enslavement. True freedom isn't found in eliminating desire, it's found in mastering it, in learning to pause long enough to decide whether that desire deserves your action. Every time a craving arises, your brain is trying to help you. It remembers what once brought relief, reward, or pleasure, and it pushes you toward it again. Dopamine is the messenger, urging you forward, promising satisfaction just around the corner. But dopamine doesn't deliver happiness. It delivers pursuit. It makes you want, not necessarily enjoy. That's why chasing every desire eventually feels hollow. The pleasure fades quickly, but the wanting remains. When you pause before obeying an urge, something extraordinary happens. You step into the space between stimulus and response, the only space where choice exists. Most people never find this space because they're moving too fast, reacting on autopilot. But the moment you stop, even for a few seconds, you interrupt the loop. You give your higher brain, the part responsible for reason, reflection, and long-term thinking, a chance to speak. That's the essence of self-control. Not suppression, but awareness. The pause doesn't have to be long. It can be a breath, a question, a moment of recognition. Do I really need this? What am I feeling right now? What am I trying to escape? These small acts of mindfulness shift your relationship with desire. You begin to see it not as an order to obey, but as information, a signal pointing to an underlying need. Maybe you're tired, maybe you're lonely, maybe you're anxious. When you slow down long enough to notice, you can respond to the need rather than the craving. That pause is where freedom lives. It's the space where your choices stop being reactions and start becoming decisions. The more you practice it, the stronger it becomes. Each time you delay gratification, your brain learns patience. Each time you resist the automatic pull, you rewire neural pathways that once linked desire to impulse. Over time, this new circuitry gives you a calm kind of confidence, the ability to want something deeply and still not be ruled by it. We often think freedom means saying yes to everything we want, but real freedom is having the power to say no. It's being able to experience desire fully without collapsing into it. When you can feel a craving rise, observe it without fear and let it pass, you're no longer trapped, you're living with desire, not inside it. This is where inner peace begins, not in the absence of temptation, but in your capacity to hold it gently without surrendering. This pause also reconnects you to meaning when you act with intention rather than compulsion. Even small pleasures become profound. A meal tastes better when it's earned, rest feels deeper after effort, love feels richer when it's chosen, not chased. The pause restores depth to your experiences because it reintroduces choice, and choice gives life its moral and emotional weight. Freedom, then, isn't about discipline alone, it's about awareness. It's knowing that you are not your thoughts, not your urges, not your dopamine spikes. You are the one who observes them, who decides which ones to follow and which ones to release. Every pause strengthens that awareness, and every act of awareness strengthens your freedom. In a world that thrives on your impulsivity, the ability to pause is a quiet revolution. It's a return to sovereignty over your own mind. Desire will always be there. It's what makes you human, but the pause is what makes you whole. It's what transforms instinct into wisdom and longing into choice. Freedom isn't the absence of desire, it's the mastery of it. It's the moment you can feel the pull of craving and still remain still, calm, aware, and fully in control.